Hello, happy Thursday. Allegra here from Beyond Your Wildest Dreams. And I'm so happy to be with you because in Southern California, we have had rain that has made such a difference for all the wildfires that were going on and also the air quality. It doesn't completely make everything better because I don't know if you have, maybe you haven't thought about this, or maybe you're not in an area where this is an issue, but this wasn't a wood fire. This was a fire of of people's homes and everything in it. So plastics and all sorts of, unfortunately, toxic ingredients were released in this fire. And for a long time, they've been in the air for the last 3 weeks, which I have been wearing a mask. And the nice thing about the rain was that the air became a lot cleaner. I could literally taste, like, on the back of my tongue, like, something kind of plasticky, kind of metallic, and that taste is gone. And now we don't have to run the air filter 24/7. Not that we shouldn't be running the air filter, but anyway, it's such a blessing to not be worried about fire and your friends or your family evacuating. So, as I've been doing the last few weeks, I wanna start with pulling a card from my favorite little deck here. So let's see what it says. Very little is needed to make a happy life. Oh my gosh, I love this so much. Marcus Aurelius, one of my favorites. Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor as well as a Stoic philosopher, and I am a big fan of Stoic philosophy. In fact, I have some Stoic philosophy books in my book recommendations. If I can find where that is, I'll put it in the podcast. For those of you watching live, as you know, I always put this up as the Harness the Power of Planning podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. And the really exciting thing about today's podcast actually is that today is my 90th podcast. So that's really fun. And so I love Stoic philosophy, and I will put my link to Stoic books. But this is so perfect because today's topic is finding the things that make your face hurt from smiling, meaning you love it so much, you can't stop smiling. And then we're also going to talk about a holiday debrief. But first, things that make, I just love this so much. This is really just like a perfect segue into my first topic. So, just to say the quote again, very little is needed to make a happy life. Marcus Aurelius. I know that if you are watching this or listening to this podcast, it might sound like I have a really big life, but I actually think my life is actually very community oriented. I used to travel a lot more than I do. I don't travel as much now because honestly, I have so many friends and family nearby and so many people that I want to see. And like for instance, I have a monthly mahjong game with some of my friends. I have twice a week walks with some of my local friends. That is really my life, and it is those things that I love the most. When I was packing up our house in order to evacuate, it's really a telling thing when you think about, okay, what are the things that I want to take with me? And I have this mahjong set that is over 100 years old. And my mom never played mahjong my grandmother always played mahjong. My mom didn't play, but I remember looking at this set in this cabinet my whole life. And I love this set because it's made with bone and bamboo, and it has such a lovely feel to it. And I just remember as a kid just loving the clackety clack sound of the bamboo. And I always thought like I want to use this set as an adult. And now that I use it, it's almost like this connection to the child in me whenever I play with it because I remember oh my gosh, I'm, like, tearing up. I remember looking at this in the cabinet and touching it, and I just love it so much, and we all have those things, whatever they are. Maybe you love playing sports, maybe you love cooking, maybe you love doing textile arts, maybe you love painting or singing. M Whatever it is, the thing that you love that especially if you can, if it makes your face hurt. Like, for instance, I love stand-up comedy. For those of you who don't know, I actually do stand-up comedy for fun. And how does one do a stand-up comedy for fun? It's really easy in LA to do stand-up comedy just for fun. Anyway, that being said, I know a lot of people who love going to concerts and love playing music and listening to music, and that's just not my thing. Now, if you invite me to go see stand-up, I am your woman, but listening to music, I just don't love it. Now, occasionally I'll make an exception, like this summer, my family, we actually went to go see Gypsy Kings, who it was so great because it was my mom, me, my husband, my daughter, and, Gypsy Kings were that was like the soundtrack of my childhood, like Bamboleo, bambolea. Maybe it was the soundtrack of your childhood too. Let me know if it was. By the way, you can always enter comments in the chat. I will see them if this is live. I will also see them if you're commenting recorded. So let me know if the Gypsy Kings were also the soundtrack of your childhood, because then I will know when you grew up. And while going to see live music is not always my thing, like I wanted to hear this voice of my childhood in person. And so we went. And the crazy thing is that my 14-year-old daughter even knows Bombolea. I don't think I've ever played it around the house because, again, I don't really play music. I don't have the radio on, I don't have CDs going, that sort of thing. She knows the song. It is just in the ether. And my husband and my daughter definitely love listening to live music a lot more than I do because watching their faces when Bombolea came on was absolutely priceless. Had my phone ready because I just knew it was gonna be a moment, and I took a little video of them, and for me, that was my favorite part, was watching them react to this because for them, music is the thing that they love so much it makes their face hurt because they're smiling so much. So, for me, I'm a comedy person. I like to see stand-up. I also love to do group dancing. And, it's something that I became aware of when I was growing up because when I was going through school, part of our PE time was spent doing group dances. Let me know if this happened to you too, because I remember learning these dances like popcorn and, the hustle and those types of dances and thinking, I love this. Does it really count for PE? But I mean, I'm happy. It's cool. Like, let's keep doing this. I'd rather do this than go run laps. And I just remember laughing and smiling like my face hurt. And the wonderful thing about that type of group dancing is that it's within the realm of pretty much everyone's ability. You don't have to be super fit, you don't have to be super coordinated. You just have to wanna give it a try. And, my husband and I actually pretty much our whole relationship, we've done a lot of dance together. And for a little while, we were doing some swing dancing because swing dancing was really huge, in the late 90s, early 2000s. But it's fun, but it's not group dance. Because group dance is when you're not just dancing with your partner. Group dance forces you to interact with everyone around you. And I think one of the major themes of my life has been how much I love building community. And so for me, group dance is the perfect combination of, I like doing movement, but I also like community. And so as an adult, I've really sought out group dance opportunities And sort of for me, the perfect combination of my interests was when I found people who were doing historical English dancing, because English dancing is very much group dancing, and I like history. I wouldn't call myself an Anglophile by any means, but I do love Jane Austen. I mean, how can you not? Her books are just amazing. They're over two I heard the other day the anniversary of Pride and Prejudice being published just passed, and it's like 212 years old. How many people can write a book that just feels so modern 200 years later? Just no one understood people the way Jane Austen. So, here we go. When I find out that there are people in the Los Angeles area that regularly do, and it's all over. There are literally dozens of English group dancing events happening in the LA area every month. Okay, maybe not dozens, maybe just dozen, but still, there's a lot. And it's my perfect combination because I love dancing and I love group dancing. I love community and I love historical things in Jane Austen especially. And so for me, it was just kind of this perfect melding of all of these interests of mine. So, what I would say to you is, what are the things that you enjoy, and how can you get as many of them together as possible? Like, for instance, I enjoy mahjong, but I don't enjoy mahjong enough to go play it in public. Like, I know people who actually go to casinos to play mahjong. I wanna play it with my friends because I enjoy community. So see, then I'm bringing together mahjong plus community, and it's, like, extra special. So how can you find the things that you enjoy and then kinda just amp them up? As I mentioned, these historical dances, I love history, I love dancing, I love community, and then some of the historical dances are actually costumed, which I love a costume. So basically, the things that make my face hurt are going to these historical dances because especially the ones that are costumed, because I get to wear a costume and dance, and especially I get to dance with friends. But now that I've been going often enough, there is just the sense of community. These are people that I know and see regularly now, and it really does feel like I'm going to the village country dance because I have things to say to these different people who I might not see that regularly except at these events, and that is so fun. So, find the things that make your face hurt because that is one of my favorite self-care tips is to know how to take care of yourself. For instance, I know that if I'm in a mood, that a surefire way to get myself out of that mood is to do 3 cartwheels. For some reason, 1 or 2 cartwheels is not enough. It has to be 3 cartwheels. I don't know why 3 cartwheels lifts my mood. I don't know if it's the physical activity or if it reminds me of being a kid or whatever, but I know that if I'm feeling a little low energy and kind of, I just need to do 3 cartwheels and I'm gonna feel great. It was interesting. It was really hard to focus enough to do anything super productive when we were wondering if we were gonna have to evacuate. So, if you haven't watched the episodes all about the California wildfires, the evacuation zone was a mile from my house, and a mile is nothing if there's crazy winds. Fortunately, when it was a mile from my house, the wind was very gentle, so it wasn't getting blown our direction, but we did have towels stuffed into any little crevices around our door to keep the smoke out of our house. We did have a filter running to filter out the air quality inside of our house. So we were basically waiting to see which way the fire would go. And it was hard to do anything outside of, what was absolutely necessary, like showering and making food. And then at one point, I said to my husband, this is when the evacuation zone was 2 miles away. I said, "I'm gonna start packing because I'm a planner, right? Harness the power of planning." Planning is one of the things that helps me, and actually it doesn't just help me. Brain science has shown that planning reduces stress and anxiety. So I'm feeling stressed and anxious because the fire is 2 miles away, or the evacuation zone is 2 miles away, which meant the fire was 3 to 4 miles away. I'm gonna start packing up. So as I'm packing, I decide that I'm also gonna do something that is gonna make me feel good, that is gonna lift my spirits, give me some mental relief. So what do? I decide to bake an angel food cake. Mhm. That's right. I'm packing for evacuation and baking an angel food cake because honestly, that's what I needed to lift my spirits. I love to cook. And so find your things that make you feel good so that when you are stressed out, you know, hey, I know that for me, doing 3 cartwheels, or, hey, baking something is gonna make me feel good, and no, this is not pre-recorded. Someone just asked if this was pre-recorded. Nope, this is totally live. So, find your things that make you feel good so that you know that you can plug into them when things are tough, when things are stressful, when you might have to evacuate because of a fire. Even then, it's important to take care of your mental health because when you're stressed out, you're not doing your best thinking. So the baking, I think, kind of just gave me the mental bandwidth to really think strategically about what it is that I need to pack into my rolling duffel bags. That's what I have for our evacuation baggage. And, of course, one of the things that I wanted to bring, I didn't bring a lot of non-necessary things. Pretty much everything was, like, papers, and I did bring some photographs that I love, but I did grab that mahjong case that I mentioned earlier because it just has so many memories for me, and it was something that I knew that I'd wanna have. So, finding the things in life that make your face hurt because 'cause you're smiling so much. Okay, maybe you're not a smiler, I'm a smiler. Literally, I went to a historical dance last weekend, and I went with 6 friends of mine. 6 friends? 3 5 friends? No, 6 5 friends. 5 friends of mine, we were a group of 6, and literally my face hurt from smiling so much. We were having such a good time, and I think one of the things that's really fun too, at least for me, about going to a costumed event is that there's a lot of anticipation. And I think in our instant gratification society, we don't get as much anticipation. And anticipation is just sometimes just as fun as the actual having of the thing. And so my friends, we were in a group chat talking about, okay, we're going to do these dance classes together and who wants to meet up for food beforehand and are we going to go out afterwards? We were trying to find a place to go get french fries after the ball, but there was nothing open at 1 a.m. that wasn't, you know, fast food. So all the restaurants were closed in the area. But we were talking about what we're gonna wear. I actually made this really cool headpiece, which I'm gonna post a video about it on Instagram because I crafted it, and it was also one of the things that helped me through the fires was crafting this headpiece. The headpiece, by the way, was based on if you know, Kate Middleton's coronation headpiece, it was these really cool leaves, so it wasn't a tiara, but it had a more sort of Greek or Roman feel to it, and when I saw that, I thought, "Oh, that would be so perfect for historical dance." So, I had a really good time crafting that, and, you can only do a little bit at a time when you're working on these tiny little things, or at least me, because, being, like, hunched over and looking at something, it just doesn't feel good for long periods of time, and so during I was crafting this all while the fires were raging for, 2.5 weeks, just a little bit every day, and then to get to wear it last week was just super fun and exciting. Again, all the anticipation. So find the things that you love that make your face hurt and find ways to do them more often. And maybe if you're like me and you enjoy community, find people that wanna do them with you because it makes it so much more fun. And it's a great way to take care of yourself. Okay, so part 2 of this video cast/podcast is about dissecting the holiday plan. Now, we have written 4 books, and by we, I mean myself and my co-author, Natasha, who's often on this podcast with me. Natasha and I wrote this book called Rock Your Holidays. We have 4 books. This is our bouquet of books. I'm holding them up for anyone listening to the podcast. We have 4 workbooks. They take about 45 minutes to go through. You see, they're super small and they're actionable. I don't know about you, but I hate it when a 200-page book, I read it and I'm like, that could have been 40 pages. That's these. And these books are the condensed, just the information you need, nothing, not a lot of extra stuff. And they're workbooks. So they're going to get you into action mode. So around the holidays, we talked a lot about our book, Rock Your Holidays, which is all about having a plan for the holidays so that you can have fun yourself. Because if you're a parent, if you're a mom, if you're a working parent, a working mom, a lot of the responsibility for making the holiday magic happen falls on you. And we know this. But you know what? You deserve to have fun too. And Natasha and I love the holidays. So having a plan is just a great way to ensure that everything we want to happen happens and that we also have fun in the process. Now, part of having a holiday plan is also doing a holiday debrief. And had the fires not broken out, we would have done this podcast earlier in January. However, here we are, January 30th. So we're doing the debrief. So here's how the debrief works. And the debrief is kind of like doing our plan in Rock Your Holidays, but kind of backwards. Not all of it, but maybe like half of it. So here's what I want you to do. What I want you to do is to think about your holiday season and get a piece of paper, preferably a planner if you have it. I like to do all of my thinking and brainstorming in my planner. As you know, if you've seen it before, I have this planner that I use. It's about 230 pages. And the reason why I love it is that it's got enough pages for me to calendar, to take notes, to brainstorm, to write joke ideas in. I can do all those things. So take your planner if you have it and go to a blank page and write at the top, holiday debrief. And what I want you to do is to write down all of the things that you did this past holiday season. And maybe there were some things that you did that you think, I don't need to do this next year. Write a 3 next to those. If there are things that you did, but you think to yourself, and by the way, by 3, I mean like, I'm definitely not doing it next year. Now, you might want to keep it on the list, but you're not going to do it next year. Put a 3 next to it. If you feel like, this was fun, but I'm only going to do it if I have extra time next year, then put a 2 next to it. And if there are things that you wrote down that you're like, oh my gosh, I love this, I absolutely want to do this again next year, put a 1 next to it. And if there's anything on the list you didn't put a 1, 2, or 3 on, maybe draw a line through it. Maybe you don't need to ever do it again. I know that my husband was working for this company that the holiday party was very meh. It used to be an evening event, and then they made it a daytime event, and it used to be a weekend event, and then they made it a weekday event. So really, it was kind of impossible to go to if you weren't an employee. So spouses couldn't really come anymore. And at one point, we just kind of put a line through it and said, this is not something that we need to do. And by the way, his employers, it's a big company. They didn't care if he was there. So we just put a line through that. And you know what? It doesn't even factor into my planning every year. It's just, don't need to do that again. So that's just a really great way of thinking about like, what's actually important? Did you do things that weren't important? Also, write down, were there things that you wanted to do more of? Maybe you wanted to see more lights. Maybe you wanted to bake more cookies. Maybe you wanted to see more friends. Whatever it is, go ahead and write that down. And what I The other thing I want you to think about too is, were there things that happened that you could tweak in order to make them even more fun? So, for instance, if you look at my Instagram, you might have seen that on January 1st, I posted a video of myself making this Danish that I call my $10,000 Danish. And I call it the $10,000 Danish because I always joke that it's so much work to make it that that's how much you'd have to pay me to make it for you. I'm taking pre-orders right now. So, anyway, it's the most amazing thing I put in my mouth all year. It's so, so delicious, but it's also so much work that I'm grateful it's so much work because it means I don't make it more often because it is not really good for you. But it's really fun to do, and for years, I was just kind of doing it randomly during the winter season. It requires a lot of rolling with butter, so I couldn't really do it when the weather was warmer because in LA, the butter would just kind of like blah everywhere. It was too warm to make laminated pastry. That's what this Danish is known as. Laminated pastry is like croissant dough where there's layers of butter in between the layers of the dough. And so I was kind of just making it haphazardly, when the weather was cooler. Sometimes I do it in February, sometimes I do it in November. And then one day I decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to do it for the new year because then I will be, quote unquote, rolling in the dough. I don't know. I just thought that was really funny. And the great thing about it is that there's that week between Christmas and New Year's. That's what we celebrate. I don't know what you celebrate, but there's that week between Christmas and New Year's that is always so wonderfully slow that it's the perfect time to do a really high maintenance recipe like my $10,000 Danish. And so I slotted that in. I was like, "Oh, this is perfect. We'll be rolling in the dough for the new year." And then the other thing that I love to do on the new year is to watch the Rose Parade because again, it's something from my childhood. I love doing it. And so now our family, our favorite thing to do is we work on the pastry the week before, then I get it all ready so that it's just sitting out on the counter overnight. It's covered, but it's sitting out so that it can kind of proof a little bit more, which means it rises up a little bit more. And then it only takes 30 minutes to bake. So as soon as I get up in the morning, I pop it in the oven. And the Rose Parade starts really early. I think it's 8 a.m. And so that way it's ready right when we're ready to watch the Rose Parade, and it's just so much fun to do the Danish and the Rose Parade together, and it's really a group effort because everyone in our family has to roll out the dough at some point because, again, it's that much work. So, that's what I mean by, is there something that you wanna do, but you can find a way to make it even more enjoyable for you? For instance, maybe you love making cookies and you wanna see people more. Maybe you plan, like, a cookie swap. Or maybe you invite friends over to bake cookies together. Or maybe you bake the cookies and then you invite people over to do a cookie decorating party. Whatever it is, the thing that you like to do, how can you get even more joy out of it? And, I always like to try new things because I remember I read once the Dalai Lama said, the key to staying young is to learn new things. And so I always am trying to look for what new thing do I want to try or learn so that I can keep my mind, my brain, active. And so I love the Rose Parade and I have never gone to visit the floats after. So for 2 days they're out on display and you can go look at them. And if you're not familiar with the Rose Parade, it's where they make these floats and everything has to be covered with something that's a plant. And so it was really cool to go see these in person and to see just the creativity, like the use of seaweed or the use of Brussels sprouts. It was really surprising and fun and just kind of, we all thought that was a really interesting sign of creativity. Now, I have to say, I loved doing it, but in my debrief of my holiday plan, I put visiting the floats as a 3. I enjoyed it, but I could probably not do it again for another 5 years, another 10 years. Like, it wasn't something I need to do again, but I did enjoy it. So, there you go. That is your holiday debrief. Write everything down, give it a score on a scale from 1 to 3. Feel free to cross out things that, you know what, you just didn't really enjoy. That's fine. Give yourself permission to let go of them. And then think about how you can get even more joy out of the things that you did enjoy. And if you want to go through the full holiday plan, it's never a bad time to do some planning, right? So get Rock Your Holidays and go through our workbook and come up with a holiday plan for yourself. It's such a great way to, as I said, brain science shows that planning is what reduces stress and anxiety. And for me, having a plan for the holidays is so, so, so valuable and important. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll see you next week. I have a very special podcast next week because I know I've talked about that I have these group of friends that I go on a trip with once a year. Well, that trip is happening. And so I'm planning on doing my podcast with my friends, and it's going to be about what it takes to put together a trip with your girlfriends when you all have kids and partners and work, and also why we do it despite it's a lot of work. Let me tell you, the number of things I have to tie up this week in order to have this trip with my friends, it's a lot, but it's so worth it. And you're going to hear us all talk about it next week. So join us for that. Thank you so much. And